the basketball with the boys. So like it's always been physical and feisty, and like that's what it is. And you got to find a way to.
A Fox News host went on social media and publicly asked whether Caitlin Clark and Sophie Cunningham should quit the WNBA. Not whether they should be traded, not whether their contracts were good, whether they should leave the league entirely, for their own safety. The post went viral instantly. It exploded across X, across every sports talk show, across every WNBA fan account. And right in the middle of it all, reporters surrounded Caitlin Clark after a game and asked her to respond. She looked at them, chose every word with surgical precision, and then shut the whole thing down in about 45 seconds. By the end of this video, you are going to understand the full story of how the Indiana Fever went from a basketball team to the center of the biggest political firestorm the WNBA has ever experienced in its 30-year history. What Sophie Cunningham actually said that started all of this. Exactly how Clark responded, and what it tells you about how she is navigating one of the most impossible positions in professional sport, and what Lexie Hull and the rest of the Fever locker room have been living through while all of this is happening around them. And stay with me, because at the 10-minute mark I am going to show you a data point about Fox News and the WNBA that reframes this entire conversation in a way that almost nobody is talking about. To understand how we got to a Fox News host suggesting the most famous basketball player in America should quit her job for safety reasons, you have to go back to where this actually started, which is an ESPN profile published on July 21, 2026. Sophie Cunningham, Indiana Fever guard, Clark's teammate, one-third of the Tres Leches trio that also includes Lexie Hull, sat for an in-depth feature interview. Cunningham is not a wallflower. She has 3.8 million Instagram followers, more than four-time WNBA MVP Aja Wilson, who has 1.5 million. She has a Sports Illustrated swimsuit cover. She served as a guest referee at a UFC event. She became famous to the broader public in 2025 when she body-checked Connecticut Sun guard J.C. Sheldon to the ground after Sheldon had shoved Clark, instantly earning the unofficial title of Clark's on-court bodyguard. Cunningham is someone who has built an enormous platform on being exactly who she is, unapologetically. And in that ESPN profile, she was asked about her political beliefs, specifically about the nickname MAGA Barbie that had been following her in media coverage. She did not dodge the question. She spoke about transgender athletes in women's sports and made clear where she stood. She said she had received a lot of negative feedback suggesting she hated transgender people and pushed back on that characterization, saying she never once said that and that she tries to extend love while also being honest about what she believes. The comments immediately set off a firestorm. Within days, the story was everywhere, and every reporter covering the Fever had one question on their mind. What does Caitlin Clark think about this? Here is exactly what happened when the media finally got Clark in front of a microphone to answer that question, and why every detail of her response matters. This was after Indiana's 100 loss to the Minnesota Lynx on August 3rd. Clark had just played a full game. She was tired. Reporters surrounded her in the post-game availability, and the question came, what is your position on Cunningham's comments about transgender athletes? Clark did not flinch. She did not panic. But she also did not take the bait. She said it is for leagues and governing bodies to work with their athletes to find solutions. She said the topic of transgender athletes is not something her and her teammates discuss in the locker room. She said her focus is on basketball, on how the team can get wins, and she pointed to that night's loss as evidence that the team had things to fix on the court. When a reporter pressed for more, Clark shut it down. TMZ captured the exchange and noted you could feel the tension in the video. She was visibly done with the line of questioning, and made that clear. What Clark did in that moment was a masterclass in navigating an impossible position. She is the most famous player in the WNBA, the most commercially valuable athlete in women's basketball, with sponsors, endorsements, and a public image that spans fans from every political background. Picking a side in that moment would have cost her something with half of them. She chose not to pick a side, and instead redirected to the only place she actually wants to be, the game. And critically, she did not throw Cunningham under the bus. She did not distance herself from her teammate. She kept her answer professional and moved forward. The Tres Leches friendship survived the political firestorm publicly intact. Now let's talk about the other side of this story, because there is a significant counter-narrative, and it deserves to be heard fully before we get to the verdict. Minnesota Lynx head coach Cheryl Reeve wore a Trans Kids Belong shirt on the sidelines the night of the Fever Lynx game. Before the game, Reeve had a personal conversation with Cunningham. Reeve declined to say what they discussed specifically, but told reporters afterward that both women understand they have platforms and that there are some things they have in common and some things they differ on, just like any issues, and that what matters is how you handle things. That is actually a more mature and substantive response to the situation than almost anything else produced in the entire media cycle around it. Meanwhile, ESPN broadcaster Rebecca Lobo praised Reeve's comments on air during the game broadcast and urged viewers to listen to her incredibly thoughtful perspective on the topic. This made Fox News host Laura Ingraham angry enough to post publicly that Clark and Cunningham should consider whether they should continue to play at all, citing safety concerns. She wrote that she honestly worried for their safety during games and entering and exiting stadiums. She did not elaborate on what specific threat she believed existed. That post went viral within the hour. And here is the genuinely fascinating thing about that moment. Ingraham's post was the one that pushed the story from sports media into full mainstream political coverage. It created the "Should they quit?" headline that every clickbait channel immediately picked up and ran with. But the post was not a legitimate safety concern. There was no specific threat, no incident, no verified danger reported. It was a political media personality using two athletes' names to make a broader point about a culture war debate. And neither Clark nor Cunningham asked for any of it. Here is the big picture that connects all of these threads and makes this story about more than one political controversy. Remember the number I teased at the start of this video? Here it is. Fox News ran 206 WNBA segments in the summer of 2026. 206. For context, before Cunningham's ESPN profile dropped on July 21st, Fox News was almost exclusively covering the WNBA through the lens of hard fouls and physicality against Clark. From July 21st through August 11th, according to a detailed analysis by Awful Announcing, the network's WNBA segments shifted overwhelmingly toward content built around Cunningham's transgender comments. The segments spread across The Five, The Ingraham Angle, Hannity, and Gutfeld. Even Jesse Waters, on August 3rd, went on The Five and said he was done covering the WNBA. Quote, "I hate the WNBA," which is itself evidence of how saturated the network's coverage had become. 206 segments. About a women's basketball league, from a network that 3 years ago barely acknowledged its existence. The Ringer published an analysis this week calling the WNBA a proxy war for nearly every modern American anxiety, including race, gender, and sexuality, DEI policies, and the pros and cons of liberal institutions. That framing is accurate and important. The WNBA did not go looking for this political fire. The political fire found the WNBA because the WNBA became too big, too visible, too culturally significant to ignore. And Caitlin Clark's arrival in 2024 was the accelerant that made the league impossible to look away from. For sports fans, for new audiences, and yes, for political media looking for a battlefield. Here is what everyone is missing in all of this noise, and I need you to hear both of these clearly. The first thing nobody is connecting properly is what happened to the Fever's actual basketball in the middle of all this political chaos. Indiana lost to the Minnesota Lynx 108-100 on the night Clark was being pressed about Cunningham's comments. That game happened August 2nd, a Sunday night when the political firestorm was at its peak. The Fever were not playing their best basketball in that stretch. They were dealing with the distraction of Cunningham's comments becoming a national story. The ongoing officiating controversy from the Alyssa Thomas throat punch earlier in the season, Clark being asked political questions in every post-game availability, and a coaching staff trying to keep the focus on wins. And yet, this is the part everyone is skipping. After all of that, the Fever went on a 5-game winning streak. They won 5 straight. They went to Toronto and set a WNBA record alongside Kelsey Mitchell. They pushed their record to 24-12. The team that was being used as a proxy battlefield for American culture wars was simultaneously putting together the best sustained stretch of basketball in Indiana Fever history. The second thing nobody is connecting, Sophie Cunningham's social media following is now 3.8 million. That is more than 2.5 times Aja Wilson's following. It is more than Paige Bucher's. It is more than every active WNBA player except Clark herself. Cunningham did not become a 3.8 million follower personality by playing the 15th best minutes on a good team. She became that because she is authentic, unfiltered, and willing to say things publicly that most athletes carefully avoid. Whether you agree with what she says or not, her willingness to be exactly herself is the quality that made her marketable enough to have a Sports Illustrated swimsuit cover and a UFC guest referee spot. And that same quality is what made the ESPN profile inevitable and the political firestorm predictable. This was always going to happen eventually. The question is whether the Fever and the WNBA come out of it stronger or weaker. Ask yourself right now, has Sophie Cunningham's willingness to speak publicly on political topics helped the Fever or hurt them in 2026? Drop it in the comments, because this audience is going to be genuinely split. My verdict on how Clark, Cunningham, Hull, and the Indiana Fever have handled the biggest off-court storm of the 2026 season is this. They handled it about as well as any team possibly could have, and the proof is in the standings. Here is reason 1. Caitlin Clark's response to being asked about her teammates' political comments was a textbook example of how an elite professional athlete in an impossible position can protect her own brand, protect her teammate, and redirect the conversation to basketball without throwing anyone under the bus or endorsing a position she does not want to be publicly associated with. She did not run from the question. She did not attack Cunningham. She did not grandstand. She gave a policy-level answer and moved on. That is elite public navigating under pressure. Reason 2. Sophie Cunningham has not apologized or walked back her comments. She has remained exactly who she is, and her fan base has rewarded her for it. Her follower count and her public profile have only grown through the controversy. You might disagree with what she said, but you cannot say she has been inauthentic about who she is. Reason 3. Lexie Hull, the third member of the Tres Leches trio, has stayed completely out of the political controversy and kept her social media presence warm, positive, and basketball-focused throughout the whole thing. That is not an accident. That is a person who understands her lane and stays in it. The strongest counter-argument to my take is that Cunningham opened the door for bad faith media to use the Fever as a political tool, and that has real costs for the league and for her teammates who did not sign up to be part of a culture war. That is a legitimate criticism, and ABC News in Australia made it directly and thoughtfully. But I still land in the same place, because the results on the court have not suffered. If anything, the Fever are playing better basketball now than they were before the controversy hit. And a team whose public profile is this elevated, even partly through controversy, is a team that is going to draw enormous viewership in the playoffs. 3 predictions for how this plays out. Prediction 1. Caitlin Clark does not make any further public statements about transgender athletes or Cunningham's comments for the remainder of the 2026 season, successfully keeping herself out of the political narrative while remaining on the court's center stage. Time frame: rest of regular season and playoffs. Confidence high. Her post-game response in Minneapolis was deliberate and careful. She found the lane she wants to stay in, and she is going to stay in it. Prediction 2. Sophie Cunningham's public platform, sponsorship deals, social media following, media appearances, grows further as a direct result of this controversy, regardless of the team's playoff outcome. Time frame: by end of 2026. Confidence high. The 3.8 million followers she already has are an enormous commercial foundation, and the controversy has only added to her name recognition nationally. Prediction 3. And this is the bold one. The political attention around the Fever actually drives higher playoff ratings than any previous WNBA postseason series, as both fans and political media tune in to watch what happens next. Time frame: WNBA playoffs September 2026. Confidence medium. The 206 Fox News segments and the massive social media engagement around every Fever story this season has built an audience that extends far beyond traditional WNBA viewership. That audience does not disappear when the playoffs start. It shows up. Here is what to watch as the season enters its final stretch. First, watch whether Cunningham gets asked more political questions in media availability before playoff games and how she handles them. She has been consistent so far, but playoff stakes and larger media pools mean the questions will not stop. Second, watch the Fever's fan attendance and television ratings in their remaining regular season games. If the political controversy is adding casual viewers rather than driving them away, the attendance and rating numbers will show it. Third, watch how the league itself responds. The WNBA has mostly stayed quiet during this specific controversy, rather than issuing formal statements. As the playoffs approach, that posture of strategic silence will either hold or break, depending on whether the story escalates further. The next video is going deep on every single Indiana Fever playoff scenario, which seed they are chasing, who they want to face in round 1, and why the bracket draw in the final week of the regular season might matter more than any individual game result between now and September. The single most important thing to take away from everything covered in this video is that what is happening to the Indiana Fever in 2026, on the court and off it, is unlike anything the WNBA has ever produced in 30 years of existence. Political firestorm, officiating controversy, coaching tensions, MVP race, historic statistical records, and a 5-game winning streak, all happening at the same time to the same franchise. That is the definition of a team that the entire sports world cannot look away from. If you want the breakdown that actually connects all of these threads and gives you the full picture of what is happening and why, subscribe right now. I do this every single week. Final question for the comments. Do you think Sophie Cunningham speaking publicly on political topics has been good or bad for the Indiana Fever as a team this season? One answer. Let's see it. One more layer worth adding before we close this out, because it directly ties the political story back to the basketball story, in a way that most coverage has completely missed. The WNBA's 30th anniversary poster became a separate controversy when fans noticed that Clark was not included among the 30 players featured. The poster had Aja Wilson, Angel Reese, Paige Buchers, Brianna Stewart, and Sophie Cunningham. Clark was absent. Social media immediately called it a disrespect. Cunningham being on the poster, while Clark was not, added extra fuel to the narrative that the league was mismanaging its biggest asset. But the real story, uncovered by sports business analyst Darren Rovell, was that Clark herself was responsible for her absence. Her licensing deal with Nike and other partners restricts use of her image likeness to approved partners. Wincraft, the company that made the poster, does not have rights to her likeness. She allows only her name and number to be used. So the Clark poster snub was not the WNBA choosing to exclude her. It was Clark's own business team protecting her image rights. That nuance got almost completely buried under the viral outrage cycle. And here is why it matters for this video. It tells you that Caitlin Clark's operation is extraordinarily sophisticated about controlling her commercial image. The same player who deflects political questions with surgical precision in post-game media is also the player whose business team has a licensing structure tight enough that even the WNBA's own anniversary poster could not use her face without permission. This is not a naive 24-year-old being dragged around by external forces. This is a player who, together with her team, is making deliberate choices about every dimension of her public identity. The political firestorm found her. She did not find it. And her response, precise, careful, professional, redirected back to basketball, is exactly what you would expect from someone operating with that level of commercial and brand awareness. That is the real story underneath all of the noise. And the Fever's 24-12 record is the proof that it is working. There is one final thing that deserves to be said clearly, and that almost every outlet covering this story has been too cautious to say directly. Laura Ingraham's suggestion that Clark and Cunningham should consider quitting the WNBA for their safety was not a genuine safety concern. There was no specific threat, there was no incident, there was no credible intelligence about danger to either player. There was a Fox News host using two athletes' names and the political temperature around them to generate engagement on social media and extend a news cycle. Clark and Cunningham did not need saving. They needed to be left alone to play basketball. And the irony is that the people loudest about protecting them from the WNBA's supposed hostility toward them are the same people whose coverage made being a Fever fan synonymous with a political identity rather than a basketball identity. The actual fans who fill Gainbridge Fieldhouse, who drove to Toronto to fill Scotiabank Arena, who watch on ESPN and ION and every streaming platform available, those fans are there for the basketball. They are there for Caitlin Clark's 8.3 assists and Kelsey Mitchell's 37-point nights and the intensity of Fever games that have made this the most watched team in the league. The political media found the WNBA because the WNBA became too big to ignore. And the best thing the Fever, Clark, Cunningham, and Hull can do with that attention is exactly what they have been doing. Win basketball games, stay professional in front of microphones, and let the court speak louder than any cable news segment ever could. 24 and 12. That is the answer to every question anyone has been asking about this franchise in 2026. That is the number that matters, not the 206 Fox News segments, not the viral posts, not the should they quit headlines. 24 and 12, the record of a team that refused to let any of it pull them off course. And with the playoffs just weeks away, that is exactly the mentality that gives them a real shot at going further than any Indiana Fever team has gone since 2012. Nobody is quitting. They are just getting started. Watch every remaining game. This Fever team is built for exactly this kind of pressure, and the playoffs are going to prove it.